Well, thanks for inviting me to be a part of this project.
Of course, and thank you so much for meeting with me today. I'm really excited to speak with you. We're having a little bit of a composer highlight section as we continue our promotion of this project. So I'm really happy to have you as somebody that we get to highlight and that we get to show off your work, both by playing it and also by speaking to you a little bit. Um,
Awesome.
so, so as you know, my project Quiénes Somos is all about celebrating Latin American culture and heritage. Your piece, Sonatina Tropical, is, a great example of, us using our heritage and maybe putting it through that Western lens of our classical music training, to say something. So,
Yeah.
my first question is, I would love for you to introduce yourself, tell me a little bit about yourself and what a project like this could represent to you.
I'd be happy to. I just wanted to do one small correction. I was told by Carla that they are performing Key West Suite, not Sonatina
Mm,
Tropical. Although that's an earlier work that I composed and published back in the early 2000s with Alri. Key West Suite is a more recent one. I believe it's from 2018, around there. So, but you're correct in saying that they are both pieces that draw from my Latin heritage, but also are about you know uh, the classical music culture. In which I was just as you. I was trained. I have a conservatory training and university training in music. Although I should say that I had to kind of seek out, uh, especially in my doctoral program, I had to seek out my own self-education in Latin American themes. So I wound up writing my doctoral dissertation on Afro-Cuban rhythms and vocal works of two of Cuba's pioneer composers from the 30s and 40s of musical modernism, Alejandro Garcia Caturla and Amadeo Roldan. So those were, and a lot of Hispanic people tell that, Hispanic and world music is oftentimes given very short shrift in traditional academic prose, and that's something that I've also contributed to Keene State College during my 30 years as a full-time professor, uh, which ended in 2021 when I retired, along with a whole host of other people at Keene State as they were going through a restructuring. So, but yes, I'm happy to talk about that piece at some point here in our conversation.
absolutely. And I want to highlight
So,
something you mentioned about, you know, not having enough importance on not just like Latin American and Hispanic music, but also other cultural music disciplines not always having that space in the Western canon that we often like that we study in conservatory, right? I have a
very
little
true.
anecdote about me trying to do, I really wanted to do the Histoire du Tango, the Piazzolla piece for flute and guitar in my for a recital, and my teacher telling me it's just there's not enough there to make it worth learning, But you
Oh my
know,
God, that's unbelievable that I played. I have a colleague who graduated from Manhattan School of Music with she had a doctorate in flute performance, and she booked me to play the history of the tango on her graduate recital. So I don't know. I remember as a piano minor at Peabody Conservatory that I wanted to study a rag, the Maple Leaf Rag by Scott Joplin. My piano teacher wouldn't let me do it. That you do that on your own time. That's not real music. And it's amazing that conservatories even reject their own the own American tradition. And Of course, I know there's some Russian piano virtuosos. I can't think of one off. There's one of them who would play the Scott Joplin piece on their programs, not just as an encore, but as a regular part of their full program. So it's a shame. Boy, I'm sorry to hear that because certainly Piazzolla is a great composer, and I thought he had certainly achieved a presence in the canon. One issue I've always encountered as a classical guitarist is that a lot of our repertoire is centered in Spain and Latin America. Whereas for a pianist, I sort of make this joke once to a pianist. Uh, when a pianist plays Ginastera and Villalobos and other some composers, that the reaction of their teachers might be, "Oh, well, you're slumming," because the heart of the piano repertoire is Central Europe. It's Beethoven, Brahms, and Schubert and maybe sometimes Debussy or Grieg or some of the countries that are in the orbit, if you will. So yeah, I think we have to get away from all those attitudes. It's funny. I remember, and you probably saw this in my CV that I had a recent wonderful experience composing a double concerto for double bass on commission for Joanne Falletta and the Buffalo Philharmonic, and she had discovered my music and had reached out to me some 10 years before. And she's a guitarist and just playing my music. What a thrill, to have this musician who has such a high place in the industry doing that. And while they were rehearsing my piece in Buffalo, she turned to me, from the stage because I'm sitting in the audience with my scores, and she says, "Well, it's so wonderful to do music that's different from what everybody learns in school, you know." And of course on the program they were doing Brahms, which everybody learns in school, the Brahms fourth. And they were doing Ginastera, which might be more in that sort of peripheral orbit. A great Argentine composer, but uh, doesn't, we read about these people in books, but they don't show up on concert programs as often as we might think, right? So anyway,
Absolutely. And that really is the core of why I wanted to make a program full of not just Latin American composers, but also Latin American composers that are living, that are active, that are, composing and adding to the culture. As you know, we have two commission pieces that are going to be premiered by myself for flute and piano.
wonderful.
We have, of course, your lovely piece that Carla will be playing. And we have another young composer, Alyssa Mena, that will have music represented. And I think that's really one of the core concepts that I want to highlight with Quiénes Somos, that especially coming from the immigrant community, myself as a first generation American, other composers as, whether they're first generation or they've immigrated here that are represented on the program, how we add to the culture, how, we can have felt like we've been at the periphery, our music, our rhythms, our sounds that we've been growing up with at the periphery of what we study, but bringing it in and seeing how it's a contribution is kind of a microcosm for what I would like to say about the immigrant community as a whole, where we add to society, we don't take away. So I'm really happy to have this type of program and to show people that this is just as valid as what you would hear from you know any standard chamber music repertoire.
Very true. And you know what? One thing that I've been happy to do, in my partial retirement, I say partial because up until recently I was teaching guitar as artist lecturer at the University of Southern Maine in Portland. But I gave it up very recently after 3 years because, well, one thing, I turned 65 and the driving the 6 hour round trip just got to be too hard. And I'm thinking I need to transition into being retired and focusing on my other projects. Um, but what I was going to say is that I've also had the opportunity as a president of the Keene Chamber Orchestra. We have repertoire meetings where we talk about repertoire we want to. And the Keene Chamber Orchestra, which is a wonderful community group here in Keene that includes both talented young people and people who are strong players, but aficionados that've had careers in other areas, or they're retired members of orchestras from the Northeast, like Baltimore Symphony and the Midwest Indianapolis Symphony, but now they're retired, but they keep wanting to play. So we've been very good about promoting music by women composers that are sorely neglected, and also by Latin American composers. And I had the opportunity to actually promote a piece by Alejandro Garcia Caturla recently. His Tres Danzas Cubanas from 1930 something. And of course, the story with him, he did not get to have a long career because he was assassinated. He was a municipal court judge in Remedios, Cuba, where a little town where, oddly enough, he would put together concerts of avant-garde music. But he was part of that circle of people like Copland and Villalobos and Henry Cowell during the inter-American period, where they were all kind of collaborating together uh, with funds from the U.S. government. It was Roosevelt at the time supporting these initiatives, a very different period in American history, right? The good neighbor policy. But anyway, Caturla wrote these pieces, and their program they're going to include this on the March 1st program, and I'm just thrilled. And I've even been in touch because I've been to Cuba several times after the thaw that happened with Obama, and for a few years there, I was actually going to Cuba and participating in the festivals as a performer and composer, and it was just an amazing thing. And I'm friends with Zorime Caturla, who is a grandniece of Maestro Caturla, and I've been able to keep her informed of these two. But she's thrilled that her great uncle is getting some performances here in America. So anyway, I just wanted to add that. So in my retirement, I'm able to uh, not just promote my own career of music, but the music of other Latin American composers, especially one that I was involved with on a scholarly basis in my dissertation.
Wow, that's amazing. And thank you for that work that's, putting to the forefront the work that, the Latin American community adds to our art form. So speaking about
Sure.
your artistic projects, I'd love to hear more specifically about the Key West Suite, and I want to hear about maybe the inspirations that go into it, what you drew from, and I want to hear all about the piece.
Absolutely. Well, I didn't know that there's too many musical compositions that are about Key West. That there are maybe rock and roll or something or like or Highlands in the Stream by Jimmy Buffett or something. But you think of Key West, you don't think of classical music. But anyway, Key West Suite came about. I had an artist residency at the studios of Key West in 2013. I'm going to give a shout out to my good friend Melody Cooper, who's a Key West resident, and so a kind of a pianist and singer who was a regular feature of the live music scene in Key West. And I forget how we got in touch. I think it might have been through Facebook. It's funny. Um, but anyway, she encouraged me to apply to their program, and I was accepted for the summer for June of 2013. They gave me a lovely house to live in the Old Town section of Key West, which of course were all the little conch houses that were originally built for the cigar rolling Cuban expat community of the 1880s and 1890s. But anyway, so the original version of Key West Suite is for two guitars, and there's a YouTube you can see. As for the Amaral duo, Mia Pomerantz and her husband, I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank. They're so wonderful, but they're a husband and wife team with degrees from Peabody Conservatory, my alma mater. And so the piece is basically a celebration of different landmarks and cultural traditions in Key West. The first movement is entitled 7 Mile Bridge, and it's in the style of a Baroque prelude with arpeggios and one guitar and the other guitar playing harmonics. In the flute guitar version, the flute plays this syncopated melody. So you can imagine it's only about 3 minutes long. Uh, to go over a 7 Mile Bridge takes about 7 minutes, but I didn't make it literally. Of course, that 7 Mile Bridge is the most famous of the bridges that I think it spans a large gap in the overseas highway in Marathon. The second movement is entitled Bolero del Atardecer, or in English, Bolero of the Sunset. And this celebrates a very popular ceremony at Mallory Dock where people watch the sunset and order cocktails and so forth. And there's kind of some street theater that goes on, but also this celebrates the presence and contribution of the Cuban diaspora there because these are folks that came as cigar workers in the late 19th century, and they were also very important. Their role was important in the wars of independence in Cuba because Jose Marti, the great apostle of liberty of Cuba, came to give speeches there. As a matter of fact, there's a little house where the placard says that he stood on the balcony there and talked to the cigar workers. And so these cigar workers, as modest as their income were, they helped raise funds for the independence movement in Cuba at that time. Bolero is a Caribbean ballad, and I'm giving a reference and acknowledging the contributions of Mexicans in the Yucatan Peninsula and so. But the bolero is very Cuban. There's no doubt about it. And boleristas like Benny Moré are a very important part of the tradition in Cuba. But anyway, the bolero typically addresses heartbreak and unrequited love, right? And we can think of the individual who has had her or his or her heart broken. But you could also say that heartbreak, you could also say it's just nostalgia, like the Presence Saudade, right? Nostalgia for a lost country, which I think I feel, and the diaspora feels that. That's a very common community-wide feeling. That's why Cubans don't say they're immigrants. They call themselves exiles. Like one of
Mm.
these days we'll go back, that's very common. So even though I came to America, to Brooklyn, New York at the age of 2, where my family first found a new life, I feel that nostalgia too. And I felt it when I went to Cuba in from 2014 to 18, which is kind of when the Trump administration kind of shut that all down in many ways. Uh, the third movement of Key West Street is a rondo. So here I pay more homage to the American popular music tradition. It's a blues rondo. So has a principal syncopated theme in a 12 bar blues format. And different episodes that I think sometimes they sound more flamenco. There's also an extended fugato, like a short fugue, like kind of the exposition of a fugue. And I enjoy actually, and my colleagues asked for that fugato because I had included that in another piece that they knew, my sonata for viola and guitar. I said, Jose, those were cool. So I said, sure. I got to show off my counterpoint training from Florida State. I got an A in both Renaissance and Baroque counterpoint. Uh, but I enjoy the fugal procedures because I think they are inherently dramatic, where one voice comes in by itself, and then the second, and then the third voice. I think there's something. I always imagine like a choreographic procedure with one dancer on stage, then joined by another dancer, then three dancers. I kind of imagine that in my mind. But obviously the fugal procedure is an homage to the classical masters like Bach, Beethoven, and others. And I should add that all of my music is eclectic, essentially. I have influences from the syncopated Afro-Cuban traditional and popular music tradition, I love jazz harmonies. I'm something of a jazz guitar aficionado, and I often do play, aside from classical recitals, I play a lot of wedding gigs where I play a lot of bossa nova and shabim and sambas and even Cuban popular music. So that's another side of my personality. I love flamenco harmonies and rhythms, and I've been trying to teach myself some flamenco things from a book, and learning the rascada. I love all the excitement, and those flamenco uh, influences were very prevalent in my the Concerto of the Rough Buffalo, because the third movement was called Homage a Tarragona, where a Spanish city where I spent a 2015 sabbatical, and the way I put it in the piece is that the two influences there were the archaic uh, ceremonial Catholic music of Tarragona, which harkens back to the Renaissance. It's really weird. And then the flamenco music, because there are flamenco groups. There was a flamenco group down the block from my apartment, and they'd be jamming at night, So I'd hear this, this gypsy stuff. So, and I think those are the two sides of Spain, the religious music and then the flamenco. Um, so there's flamenco in there, and I've been told reviewers sometimes talk about my soaring melodies, and it's true. I love the melodic element. I'm a big believer in melodies that come to you after midnight. You wake up and you can't sleep, and something has come to you, and you got to race down to the piano to notate this and start to work this out. So that actually happened with the Sonatina Tropical you mentioned earlier, where Canción de Madrugada is a melody that came to me at 3 in the morning, and I raced down to the piano and worked it out. So anyway, so yeah, I believe maybe in the the universe speaking to you and giving you ideas, you know,
Absolutely.
like a
And
big kind of a channel, kind of channeling other powers.
I love that. And I'm particularly struck about the sense of like this eclectic compositional style that you have and the mixing of cultures because in as you were mentioning in the Key West suite, first of all, we're choosing a location that is so symbolic of that mixing of cultures, of that, like
It's
you said, how
true.
they used to call themselves exiles and that they always wish to go back and working towards the liberation, but also on like a cultural standpoint, how so many things mix, from Baroque forms like fugues and more classical forms like rondos, and then mixing in harmonies from jazz and the blues, and even the flamenco. I completed two master's degrees in Spain, um,
Oh,
and
wonderful. What a great opportunity.
absolutely. One of the things that I learned because my school, ESMUC, in Barcelona, has a whole degree on flamencología,
Yes.
is that flamenco actually has early ties with influences from India and people who moved their culture. So all that is to say, by mixing we by mixing so many different cultures together and adding, whether that's the polyrhythm that can be found in Afro-Cuban music to just so many cultures that come together and it forms this rich tapestry that we draw from, right? Just like you mentioned, like receiving from the universe and getting that inspiration, we kind of receive that from like our own humanity and our own connectedness across the world, which again speaks to why I'm doing a project like Quiénes Somos, because the immigrant community, uh, we're no different from any other community. As a first generation American, who's to say I'm different from anybody else here or anybody living outside the country? We're all one in our humanity, and it's about creating that community so that we can mix and create richness out of it. So I love that about your compositional style and what you're mentioning here. I'm really inspired by that. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. No, as you were talking, I was thinking to myself too, and um, two scholars that come to my mind who talked about this were oh no, Fernando Ortiz in Cuba, who talked about something called transculturalism, transculturalismo, and this is the idea of culture as being essentially dynamic, and it's always going through waves of change. Um, and also Maria Andrade, who was in Brazil, was a scholar and writer who was part of there was a I think a 1922 meeting of artists in Sao Paulo who talked about new currents in Brazilian culture and music. Villa-Lobos was part of that, and they referred to cannibalism as a feature of Brazilian music culture, that it absorbed cultural influences from other countries and other cultures, and you see that especially with Villa-Lobos and the Tropicalia movement later with um, I'm forgetting the names, Gilberto Gil and his colleague. And we, as individuals, we're actually part of that. Maybe, sometimes I'd have to explain to my students the difference between fusion and these kinds of larger cultural movements. So fusion, you might think yourself as an individual, I want to create a hybrid stuff, but it's not even about that. It's like these other things are just naturally part of your musical personality, and you're part of a movement, and whether you're conscious of it or not. I recall a wonderful biopic about the jazz saxophonist Dexter Gordon. And at one point he says something in the film, the character says something in the film that stuck with me. He said that your style as a musician it's like a tree that's growing inside you. It's like you're not even so much in control of it. It's sort of something that changes on its own without your conscious uh, adaption or interference. So it's not completely self-generate. It's not generated from your mind as such, although that's part of it. You have a cerebral intellectual concept of music, but the emotional things and the music that you love to listen to, that becomes part of that tree that's growing inside you as a creative artist. So,
Absolutely. And that's such a beautiful way to put it. So I do want to transition into our kind of the last kind of major question that I wanted to pose. And this is more about our mission to create empathy and connection within the audience of Quienes Somos. So, as I mentioned in our previous conversations, we will be sharing immigrant stories and trying to activate that empathy for each other and come together in community. So, with that in mind, what is something you would like to say about the immigrant community, uh, and and then what's something that you would like to say to the community at large, maybe to those outside of that community?
okay, yeah, I think I will. And this part of my talk might be a little political, but I think it's okay. Politics is
Absolutely.
also about humanism. You can't stray from political topics because just because somebody might be offended. I think the immigrant community historically is a resilient one by necessity. I think of, for example, Cuban immigrants from my parents' generation who, uh, came, and and that first wave of immigrants had many of them had university degrees and they were doctors and accountants and architects and they had other professional degrees and training and roles in Cuba. When they came to this country, of course, those degrees were considered worthless in America, and so they had to do also all sorts of manual labor. I remember my first wife's father had to drive an egg truck and and uh, live in small apartments and buy cars that were barely on the edge of falling apart. And so this resilience, this process of moving up in uh, economically and socially was part of that. But in general, I think uh, you think of immigrants who are very resilient. They come here and they're working jobs that in the words of Vicente Fox, even people here don't want to take, but they're willing to do it to send money back to their families. So it's a very resilient, hardworking community, and it's painful to hear them disparaged by people, by the president and other people in his administration. My parents, of course, had to leave Cuba because of the communist government and the oppression of political expression and the indoctrination. And they didn't want their children, they didn't want us to grow up in a dictatorship or to experience the poverty and collapsing infrastructure of Cuba, which is well known. I mean, I'm thinking of the special period of the 1990s, and now I'm told it's even worse. But yeah, I've been to Cuba, and I admire their resilience there too, in terms of dealing with the hardships and almost having a sense of humor about it. And I should mention, passing, after seeing them, I'm not a fan of the embargo and policies like that because I agree with Jimmy Carter that you shouldn't have policies that hurt the common people. You can uh, have policies that maybe go after the leadership, but for whatever reason, the American government, both administrations of both political parties, has never seemed to share that. Um, Other Hispanics had to leave their countries for similar reasons that I just indicated. The folks from Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Haiti, other countries. And it's a shame to me to experience our beautiful country, the United States, moving in the direction of a kind of fascism, I'll just use the word, and the suppression of rights that are supposedly guaranteed to us by the Constitution. But I have confidence that America will is going to bounce back and go back to the striving, and to use a phrase from the uh, Declaration from the Constitution, I think, to strive for a more perfect union. And with a recognition of the fact that we have a shared history as a nation of immigrants. After all, the English pilgrims that came to Plymouth Rock were just as much immigrants as the Italians and Chinese in the 19th century, and the more recent Hispanic and Muslim immigrants of the 20th and early 21st century. So I don't think that white nationalism can ever be a unifying philosophy for this country. And so I think that that's just a temporary blip that we're going to, I hope.
Yeah, and thank you so much for saying that. And I'm particularly, thankful of, we of what you're saying about we can't shy away from being political, because I think our art, as musicians, as artists, we're not like doctors where, we provide a life-saving service. But I do believe that as artists, it is our job to say something and to do something with our art that's not just, oh, here it is because it's pretty, but also to have a message, to have a perspective. Um, so I thank you for that, and I thank you for being so forthcoming with that. Um, I
Uh,
once again, oh yes, sorry.
Well, I just want to say, I think music has always been a bit subversive. Even if you think back to the 18th century masters like Mozart, the operas he wrote were kind of subversive because they showed had servants and aristocrats, and the servants were rebellious, or they were, that they would get the one-upmanship over their masters, and yeah, I don't think music. I can't stand anybody that says, "Oh, just entertain, just shut up." No, we're not just entertainers. We music is uh, always been a subversive. It's culture, and culture is subversive. I think of Mahler in his symphonies, like the first symphony, including passages that harken to klezmer band. How might that have been received? Maybe his audience, which we know was very anti-Semitic, and he suffered the effects of that when he was both in Vienna and in New York when he was conductor of the New York Philharmonic. Um, how might have they reacted to that? He was kind of like almost like waving a middle finger at some of those people, you know? So musicians are naturally, I think, some rebellious in a way because uh, I think maybe it goes back to our parents because typically parents don't encourage their kids to be musicians unless maybe they come from a long tradition of music. I imagine J.S. Bach or Mozart's father. Yeah, yeah, you could be a musician, but you have to be really good, you know. And parents will say, no, music is a career. No, no, become a doctor, become a lawyer, or think of Hector Berlioz, they tried to send him to medical school. He fainted at the sight of blood, So. Um, so I think that rebelliousness is part of just wanting to pursue music as a career. It makes you kind of an outlier in the first place. Even if you achieve some success, and that's what I was going to say. Yeah,
Absolutely. And thank you so much. Just in closing, I want to give you the thanks for taking time to speak to me today. I'm so excited to have your piece presented at Quienes Somos. I think we're doing everything that we can to increase our impact. We're inviting, Congress people, we're inviting city council members. We really want to make an impact, and I'm very happy that you're a part of that, and your music, your art is part of that. So thank you so
I'm so
much.
happy to be part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Juan, for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts and feelings about this. And I'm looking forward to hearing Carla and David. I know that they're going to do just a spectacular job interpreting my Key West suite. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Have a lovely rest of your day.
You too, man. Hasta luego.
Hasta
Hasta la
luego.
vista.
Bye bye.
Sí.